For the last 20 years, I've been doing business consulting. I've taught at several colleges and lived in Colorado the whole time. Consulted, event planning, designing programs, doing strategic planning with companies and for nonprofits. So I've been running. I'm just really glad to be here tonight. And I'll bet some of you will know why when I tell you. It's because that picture that's out on that billboard at the intersection is going to be gone. That is awful. And I don't want it there anymore. Put that in your notes, you event planners. So I'm really glad to be here. I love business. I have been in business since I was born, I feel like, and I think it's everything that we do in life. It's business. I am really happy to talk to you about business. When Shawn introduced it, she said small business ownership. Now, someone and I, where are you, honey? We were talking grammar a little bit earlier. Look at where the colon is. Yeah, so my youngest son is a grammar freak, Brian. And he drives me crazy. But he says, you know, Mom, there's a difference between let's eat, Grandma, and let's eat, Grandma. He said, there is a difference between your shit and your shit with grammar. And there's a big difference with grammar. Well, you can see there's a colon up here. So when people talk to me about small business, I talk about ownership. That's what it means to me. So how many of you in here are small business owners? 2 of us raised our hand. How many of us are making a living at that business? There's another couple in here. They're just not raising their hand. All right. How many in here have had a small business in the past? Couple, 3, 4 of us. Good. How many in here work in a for-profit situation? In other words, you work for somebody like Bean Broker or True Value or a for-profit situation. Okay, a few of you. How many of you in here work for nonprofit or government? A bunch of us in here. How many in here most of the time sit on your couch and watch Netflix every second you can? Don't raise your hand, you guys. I raised my hand on all of those except the last one. Yes. Well, when we talk about small business, ownership, let's look at a couple things here. All right, let's talk some facts. I read something recently that I thought was so great, and it said entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a big word out there. Have you guys heard it? Yeah. About starting your own business, working for yourself, having all this time. Well, there's a kind of a wave of entrepreneurs, and they work at coffee shops, and somebody says, what do you do? I work for myself. I write. Where do you live? Well, with my mom. I've been living with my mom for quite a while. So there's this focus on entrepreneurship that's just not working somewhere else and hanging out on your own. Well, entrepreneurship in its, I know you can't see this, it's too small, but entrepreneurship is the process of taking all the risk to create, to build, to run, to manage a small business that produces something that someone will pay for. So there's 1,000 writers in the world. There aren't very many published authors who have sold their work. Okay, entrepreneurship is a big risk, and it's taking that risk to produce something worthwhile. Okay? Now, when we look about 28 million small businesses in the U.S., that's 1,162 to 1, every one corporation. 70% of small businesses are owned and operated by a single person, and every one of us in here who are in business right now own and operate our own business. There's 4 of us that I see, and maybe a couple of you over here. 2% of small businesses are franchises. Most, 54%, are home-based. Okay. Small businesses employ 57% of the country's private workforce. Small businesses pay 44% of the U.S. payroll. That's pretty cool. 60 to 80% of all new jobs come from small business, and around 50% of small businesses are still open after 4 years. There's a lot of talk about the fact that 90% fail in the first 3 years or first year. There's lots of stats out there. I went to a couple different sources to check that last fact, and basically what I'm reading is that we are in business after 4 years. Whether we're making a living at it is another question. It's really hard to measure all of that. So, what is your small business? I want you to think about this in context bigger than, do you own a business right now? What is your small business? Look at this. Look at these up here. Having ideas, planning, strategizing, producing something, having some vision. Small business owners need to do these things. Look at this. Lead with enthusiasm, hire, train, evaluate, fire staff or workers, build marketing materials, clean the bathroom, develop a website, keep the books, purchase the stuff, sell the stuff, find insurance, decide which accountant to use, lock the doors, buy, lease the building, mow the lawn, feed the kids, go to the game, pay the bills, fill in for sick employees, motivate everyone, etc., etc., etc. What does that sound like? Work? What else does it sound like? How many of you do some of those things every day? How many of you do a lot of those things every day? Seriously? Yeah, how much do? We do a lot of that kind of stuff. Oh, I love it. That's why I love business. Because it's what we all do every single day. Business is life. Life is business. So, I do have a small business. Every one of you has a small business, and that's the life that you live. That is pretty cool. So, if business is life, how did I get here? My title's Pain or Pleasure, 50 Shades of. And I know nobody has read that book. I didn't either. I just looked at the pictures. I didn't read all 3 of them. And they're not in my Kindle. The 50 Shades of Business Ownership, and truthfully, of life in general, of work in general. It's that ownership. So how do we go about it? Let's look here. Here are a few of the things to think about if you really take ownership, that colon ownership. If you really take ownership, here are a couple things to think about. Okay, values clarification. This is something that I learned when I was in my 30s, something about this, about values clarification. Some of you have heard about it. Many of you have. It's looking at what we actually value in our life. I do a thing with students, and I don't think I don't remember, Dean, if we did it, and I don't think anybody else is in here, but what I do is I throw them out a package of values. And they take those values and they line them up. And I say, line them up first to last. And there's about 30 of them. And so they line them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like that. And then we go on a plane trip. And you know what happens? About halfway through, the plane is overloaded with values. And you have to throw about 10 of them out. So how many of these students look at this and go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they take the last 10 and throw them out? Then we get into shark-infested waters, and they have to throw out a bunch more. And they throw them out. Never, ever does someone go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and throw out the last ones and then the next ones. They always reevaluate. What do you think moves up to the front with young people as they're losing values? Which value do you think started way at the end and moves up as they're losing values? What did you not think about too much until you turned 45, 50, 55, 60? Retirement might be one. Yeah. What about health? Yeah. How much that moves up the older you get. But when you're losing your values, when you're throwing them in the ocean, never to be seen again because this airplane is faltering, you're going to start thinking about it, right? And you move them up. So they rearrange, they clarify what values they have. When they look at that, they revisit back and say, how do I do business in my life? That's really important. So let's look here real quick. If you look at those and you put them up and you say, okay, what guides me? Well, students always can then say, I've looked through these, I'm pretty sure that these are the values I live by in my business, my life. And we say, okay, that's very cool. So next question, how? How do you live those values? And almost always with students, family is pretty high because they're away from their family. I say, how do you value your family? And they go, I go home every month or so. Cool. How much time do you spend with your parents? Well, my mom washes my clothes. That's very cool. Yeah, and what else do you do? How often do you call? When do you talk to your grandma? Do you send cards? Do you send thank you cards? All that kind of stuff. Talk about in this business, we have to walk the talk, right? What do we really value? We can name it, but if we're not actually living, if we're not actually walking the talk, it's kind of empty. It's kind of empty. So we revisit. We look at them again and we say, if I couldn't explain my intentions, how would other people interpret me? Because, the people around us see what we do, they don't see what we say as much. So if I can't explain, oh no, I meant that, I just meant that I'm busy. I didn't mean I, didn't want to, no, that's what I meant. If we can't say what we meant, how are they interpreting what we do? So revisit those values, realign as we go through. That's something we should do often with purpose. Okay, there's a couple roadblocks that get in the way of that. This is a great one. How many of you have heard this theory? You are now what you were when. Have any of you heard it? Oh, it's such a good one. Some of you are kind of almost have it. You are now what you were when. Think about this. Because what happens is when we're under stress, when we're under pressure, when we've got to make the bottom line, when we've got to get out there, when we've got customers that are driving us crazy, when we're breaking up with our boyfriend, when whatever it is, when we're stressed, when we're under pressure, when we're fearful, we revert back to the values that we had. You are now what you were when you were 11 years old. Think for a minute about who you were as an 11-year-old. What were the threats? What were the values? Think about it for just a second. 11 years old, what was going on in your life? I can tell you that when I'm stressed and when I'm pressured, I revert back to becoming the little mama. I start to take care. I start to try to get control. Because when I was 11, my world was out of control. Out of control. I didn't know which way was up or which way was down. And I had 4 little ones, little brothers and sisters, and 1 older sister, and my job was to protect them. When I get stressed out, or until I start thinking about this and thinking about how I want to run the business of my life, I would always go into that mode. You can ask my sister, she's here right now. I start hurting, don't I? And I start telling people what to do and where to go. And let me tell you how to do this in your life, because I can take care of you and I can get this all together. I start becoming the little mama that I was at 11. I revert back. Now, I know a lot of people, when they get under pressure, you can tell they turn into that 11-year-old. My husband was a fighter. He beat everybody up on the block when they moved, and he beat everybody up. And then when he would get pressured, even as he's grown older, anger was his way of handling things. You are now what you were when. Once you realize this, I promise you, I love Steve Jobs. Let's make a dent in the universe. I believe that this little teeny dent of saying, wow, could I do that? This little teeny dent changes our lives forever. It's the best stuff ever. I like this stuff. You can tell. Okay, we revisit. So we went on the plane trip. We've looked at our values. We've revisited. We've realigned. We've thought for a minute about this theory about consciously in adult mode, purposefully saying, do I really do that? Let me think about this a little bit, because maybe I do. I don't want to. I want to be more of an adult. So think about that. You are now what you were when you were 11 years old. We can change that. Here's another one that I just love. Pain or pleasure, our values. So when we choose to move somewhere, that's where I want to go, that's my value. Is it 50 shades of gray, 50 shades of lovely, 50 shades of blue and sad, 50 shades of what? Values, pain, and pleasure. The theory is, well, let me ask you a question. How many of you have stayed in a relationship too long? Stayed in a business too long? Stayed in a job too long? Yeah. How many of you have worked at a place where you kind of don't like anybody? Don't like the values? Don't like? You've done that. How many of you choose the wrong person to date over and over? Don't answer that, but you probably have a friend who does that, right? Yeah, you have a friend who does that, yeah. How many of you sabotage yourself right when you get there? I swear that peanut butter cookie that I had right before I came in was not a sabotage. It was a reward for not eating anything all day. Crazy. Okay, so let's look at this. This is the coolest stuff ever. I like this. So the truth is we work harder to avoid pain than we do to gain pleasure. Now think about this in your business world. Think about this in your life. Think about this in your small business. We work harder to avoid pain than we do to gain pleasure. That's the theory. So let's think about this. When you think about some of those things, do we work harder to be collaborative, or are we trying to avoid conflict? Do we seek strength of character, or are we trying to avoid being weak? There's so many programs out there about bullying. Bullies have no strength of character. They're trying to avoid being weak, and they do it because of that fear that's in there. Avoid being weak. Do we seek love, or are we actually just really scared of being abandoned or be alone? We all know those girls. They go with the wrong guy all the time, and they will swear, I love him. I love him. And we go, honey, he's bad news. He's bad. Everybody knows he's bad, but I love him. We think, well, what do you really want in this? Well, I don't want to be alone, when you can kind of think of it. So when we think of values, when we think of business, when we think about going down, do we revert back to those values that we had when we were 11? Do we do things out of fear? Because people will work harder to avoid what they fear than they will to gain what they want. Does that make sense? Can you think of some? Ooh, I like this stuff. Do you really want integrity, or do you just not want to look bad? Do you really stand for the values in your business? Or are you just trying to avoid being hungry? Or whatever it is that goes in there. I like this one. I learned a lot about myself in this one, because I absolutely know that everything I did the first 40 years of my life was in fear. Nobody ever would have guessed it. Oh, you're so together. I'm scared. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to let that happen, so I'm going to do this. Well, that's looking back instead of forward. So when we talk about it, we look forward and say, in business, in the business of life, the power is choosing. There's a lot of power in choosing to move forward, to go after what you want versus avoiding what you fear. It's kind of cool. Have any of you seen a movie called Marvin's Room? It's an old movie with Diane Keaton and Meryl Streep. I love that movie. It was very cool. But one of the parts in the movie, the lady's taking care of her invalid father, and her crazy sister comes in and says, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? This girl has gone with every bad guy, every bad news in the world, and Diane Keaton, the one who stayed there with her dad for many years, says, I just feel so blessed that I've been able to love him. She didn't say, I feel so blessed that he's loved me, or I feel that I got love back. She said, I'm so blessed that I was able to love him. I think that's such a cool thing. I'm so blessed that I get to do this business, to work this business, to put my product and service out there. I'm so blessed that I get to do that. And that there's money that comes back too. Every single day am I standing up there and taking care of those values. When we look at this stuff, if some of these theories have validity, really you need to think about it. We do need to think about this. How many shades of pleasure am I working toward? How well do I walk my talk? My son, Brian, he asked me the last time I was there, he's got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and he says, Mom, he's always got these questions that nobody in the world could answer. Then he criticizes me no matter what I say because he's a good son. He goes, Mom, he says, if I could pass on one thing to my kids, one thing, what would it be? Because I've been thinking about what I want to pass on. Oh, that's a big question. What would you choose? I don't know. I said, son, it doesn't matter what you want to pass on. What they're going to learn is who you are. Kids can find a hypocrite like that. What you do pass on is who you are, not what you want to pass on. But then, in order to answer his question, which I'll teach you in interview class, you must answer the question. Like, who's the worst teacher that you've ever had? You have to say Mrs. Wood. The next thing is to expound, and tell about why and what you learned. But then I said, well, if I could teach him one thing, if I could prove one thing and live one value in my life, it would be love. Because what's the opposite of fear? What's the opposite of love? Sorry, said it wrong. Everybody thinks it's hate. The opposite of love is fear. Yeah, what we fear instead of what we want. So this is why I just love business. Every single tiny thing, Connor, that I've learned in business through my MBA has mattered in everything I've done in my life. It's so great. It's so important. I am the entrepreneur of my own life. Whether or not I like it, remember what we read at the start? An entrepreneur is someone who risks everything, puts it out on the line to produce something worthwhile. That's what we do every single minute in our lives. We risk everything. So we gotta pay attention. We gotta look. If I risk everything, I certainly want to choose. I want to choose to revisit, to realign, to recommit, because I know that my 90, how many kids do I have? Joel, 97 students or something like that, this 8. I know that when they look at me, they don't go, oh, there's that person that knows all this stuff. They go, I wonder what she's going to do, how she's going to act, where she's going to be, if she's going to recognize me, if she's going to look up. I wonder. My behaviors consistently express my intentions and my values, so I really need to take an honest look at what I do. That's why when you look at grammar, you see that my topic was actually small business, is ownership. It's taking ownership. It's moving forward toward what you want instead of trying to avoid what you don't. It's paying attention. It's having fun. And thank you for coming. Now, will you please get my picture off of that billboard? It's no more. Thank you for coming. Come on, tell me what you wrote about me, you people. They're critiquing me per class. Oh, you are too. Oh, yes, good. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question, Terrie. So you had told me that you have started and built businesses, yada, and so forth. What advice would you give to someone that is considering starting their own small business? What kind of advice would you give them?
Right here. Right here. When you can align what you love, what supports what you value in the world with what somebody's willing to pay for, you've found the perfect match. It's easy to start a business. We can do it in about 90 seconds online, $2. We can start a business. It's easy to do that. What's hard is doing something that's of value to people, enough value to people that they're going to pay you for what you do. And the way to get that and have joy in it is to figure out how to align your passions, the things you want to work toward, with what people are willing to pay for. And then you work your butt off. You work your butt off. But you do when it's passion. How many of you work hard at golf, but you never even think about it because it's fun, you love it? Just think, I get to do what I love. I've trained at Microsoft for, that's the best place, by the way. Every room you go into, they have food and drink. And they have 3 trashes. They have a compost or whatever. Whew, they pay people not to drive their car to the campus. So instead of, you know, you have to pay for parking if you come, and you get paid if you don't drive. So you ride your bike or you catch public or whatever. There's thousands of people on that campus. That was fun, except I hate technical stuff. They asked me questions like, does that platform fit this or that? And I said, I don't know. And they came into my class, coming from the 6 Thinking Hats class. How many of you had the 6 Thinking Hats and any of that? Yeah. They came into my class saying, wow, that 6 Thinking Hats was the coolest stuff. And I said, that's my passion. This other stuff is not my passion. Now, I like the other. I like the soft stuff. So I also got to train at some snow ski resorts and I've done Whitewater River team building training with a bunch of techie people from Houston. That was fun. We tipped a boat over. That was scary. They did it, I didn't. I've been a babysitter, a bartender, taught at a prison, maximum security prison, men's prison, 5th through 8th grade reading, writing, and math. Taught middle schoolers, that was harder.
Harder than prison.
Ooh, yeah. What else? Ask me something, come on. How many points do you get for coming into this class? You guys have to write me the name of your teacher so I can thank them. I never thought about giving my students extra credit. They might not still have come. I'll have to think about that.
How many students are enrolled in business at Chadron State or going for a business major? Do you know approximately?
I don't, but do we know?
If you're talking undergrad and grad, I think it's 600 plus.
They're doing a master's or an undergrad in
Yeah,
business?
yeah, either undergrad or grad, it's a little over 600.
So does the college do a lot of entrepreneurial type classes?
Yeah, I'm teaching a couple of them, or I have. Small business startup, which is writing your business plan, and it's really hard and really great. And opportunity and imagination and opportunity, another entrepreneurship, which was a hoot. That's where we did 6 Thinking Hats and Whack on the Side of the Head is the other book that we used, which I just like because you can whack them on the side of the head every time you come in and say it's the book. And there are others, I think. You know, I just got hired last fall, and I've been teaching econ, business, marketing, management, so forth. And I haven't taught at Chadron for 20 years in between. But I love it. Yeah. I think I'm going to teach next year. Yes, sir.
Between that 20 years span from Chadron to Chadron, what did you do in between there?
I've had a business consulting business forever. I started it when I was here before, and I did, at that time, all of the training like sexual harassment and team building and, there's lots of that kind of stuff that was mandated. You had to do the sexual harassment training, you had to do safety training, you had to do, and I started doing that kind of stuff while I taught here, just as a young teacher. And then I kind of worked through the University of Nebraska to do a lot of speaker series for them. And so I worked down at the university and all over Wyoming and Nebraska doing workshops. And that might be team building, dealing with difficult people, how to set up a training program, how to create an orientation program. I've done strategic planning with the tribal organizations, with the conservation districts of tribes across the nation, helped them do strategic planning, and I've worked with the Department of Ed and done wellness programs, developing wellness programs in districts and schools, and that kind of nonprofit stuff. So I am old. I mean, you think I've had 40 years on you doing stuff, so, and it's been a blast, every bit of it. I love it. Yes, sir.
Were you in real estate too?
Oh, yeah, I started in a real estate company, a little boutique real estate company up in Buena Vista, Colorado, and I sold it. Yeah, it was good. It was great. We had a blast. Pinion Real Estate, Buena Vista.
Mountain community?
Yeah, second homes, but not Aspen or Vail type. More like hikers, fishermen, campers. Yeah, it was really fun. I learned a lot. Yeah, we had a great logo. PinionRealEstateBV.com. It's still there. I sold it to my partner. It was so great. I also started a pottery business, paint your own pottery, and I had that for 3 years. That was fun too. Birthday parties, painting. I never thought of myself as ADD until just now. Crazy.
I have another question regarding college students nowadays. When they're going through business school and wanting to be entrepreneurials, are they totally geared towards the technology sector and industry? Is that where they're predominantly wanting to go? Or do you still see students wanting to go into traditional business like brick and mortar, construction?
I think there's some of both, and you guys can answer that too. I think there's some of both. I had 35 business plans last semester of last 8, and I've got 35 this time, and a lot of them are traditional businesses because that's what we have in our mind. It's how to start a coffee shop and how to do a pet service and how to do this and a construction business and engineering, whatever. And then I had several who want to build an app. And I can't share that with you because it was such a great idea. It's an app, a phone app there's probably a market for it. It was very cool. I had a retired dentist pediatric dentist from the service who's starting a horse farm. I mean, that kind of thing. I think that as we face in business right now, as we face everywhere, it's blurry. I mean, we don't know what it looks like. We're training people, and you all are stepping out. You have to have some guts. I mean, I love this about you guys that are coming out of college, because you don't know what it looks like. I mean, when I taught resumes, if you showed that you had a job every year, that's bad. That was bad. That meant people didn't want you. But my daughter-in-law, who is in startups in just south of San Francisco, she has done something every 18 months or she's losing ground with a different company, a different startup. And she has those transferable skills that what you learn and take with you that makes her valuable to the next person who wants her. It's a different world. The tech world, I don't even know. I had a student who wrote a business plan for designing and selling an EP. Are any of you in music? It means something. And I made him tell me. Pretend like I'm a 5th grader and tell me what this little sucker is. And he did. And I knew it then, but I can't think of it now. But to write a business plan for that, it's all online, and there's no investor because there's no cost. It's how do you get it online and get it out there. My son wrote a book and published it. He's written a series of 4, and then he wrote a war memorial for a friend, and that one is sold really good. The other 4, I mean, he probably sold 500, 600, 800 each. Doesn't cost much to get that going. Right now, he's in the middle of a book that he wrote, a high school angst book, and they're writing a screenplay. I mean, where did that come from? Do any of you guys know Shawn Bridges? He's the man who takes the girl in Home, or whatever that show is that's out with Room. Yeah, Shawn. Yeah, he's the bad guy in that, and he's one of those actors that he wants Brian's screenplay. He wants to write a movie over it. It isn't even, published. Who knows these days? I mean, I write under a different name. I did not write 50 Shades because I can write better than that because I do know grammar. Yeah, so I could have a whole bunch of stuff out there. You know, it used to be when I was teaching before that you could tell students, you know, they'd say, in these classes, you'd say, well, if you want to be different, wear Mickey Mouse underwear to your interview. Do not wear a tattoo or a piercing. And I always said, you guys, you know, you've never seen my tattoos, have you? And they'd go, Mrs. Wood has a tattoo? That's kind of interesting. And now they go, Mrs. Wood has a tattoo? She's 60. That is awful. Yeah, but you know, it's that kind of life where you go, well, now it can be much bigger than that. You could be a published author that sold a lot of stuff and we'd never know because of the way business is. So it's a great question. Our kids have to have a lot of guts to step up there and do what they're going to do. And we're just so excited to be part of that journey. You know, we're lucky. Yes, other questions? We're free. Let's go eat.
Well, thank you very much, Terrie, and thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming.